Okay, so we're doing a series of videos on punching and drifting at the moment, and I wanted to just throw in a quick supplementary video about making what I classify as a punch drift. I've got 8 inches of 3/4 inch round S7 in the fire. Don't have to be any fancy S7, any of the big supply houses will do it. McMaster-Carr, I know they have it by the foot, so a little pricey, but it's worth it. You'll only make the tool once. I've got a bucket of really creepy old canola oil, which smells like a bad fish shop. And I'm going to do this on the power hammer. You can do this just as easily by hand. It's going to take you a while, just face it. S7 does not move in a hurry, so take your time with it. I'm going to start on the back end. I'm going to drop it down to about 1/2 inch-ish, 5/8, 1/2 inch on the back end, round out. About 1 inch long, then flip it around, pull out the front end. I'm going to drop that front end down to about 3/8. I'll draw up in a minute. Excuse me, man. Just a little bite. I did square, octagonal, and then round out. Kind of skip the 16. Bring it down to the bottom end of its teeth. Oh well, got a little bit of puckering in that back end, that's quite normal. That's given me a good strike end. I want something just a wee bit smaller than the original material. And then front end, I'm going to very aggressively drop down the very front to give or take 3/8 of an inch, and then pull my taper back all the way back to the tongs in the square, octagonalize, 16s, round up. Should take a peek. Then right at the end of that, I'll then put a point on the end. So we started off with S7, weird S. It is 3/4 inches, 3/4 inches round, solid, and it is 8 inches long. Okay. Proportions. About 1 inch long. Back end should be 1/2 inch to 5/8, so let's call it 9/16. I'll put 1/2 inch to 5/8. You want a bit of straight in there, probably 2 inches. And then taper, however long your taper comes. The more straight of a taper, parallel of a taper, however you want to term it, you can get, the better, because that will create a smoother action in your drifting. So this should be about 3/8. And then if we take this over here, that bit at the tip eventually will be something like that. So there will be 3/8, and here will be a 1/4 inch. 1/4 inch. People ask me about, that should be about 1 inch long. People ask me a lot about punches and how the mechanics of them work. A little bit to think about. The surface area of a 1/4 inch to a surface area of 3/8 of an inch is more than double. So if we consider those as 1/8 inch squares, right, those are 9. And that's 3/8. And this is 1/4, right? And those are 4. So I know it's not in the round, but theoretically, point being, that is 4, that is 9. That means that I have twice plus the surface area or physical thermal mass absorption of this. This also means that to drive that 3/8 through is going to take more than twice the amount of energy on the tip to drive through the same amount of material. So I'm going to go through 1 inch material. That will take twice the amount of energy as driving a 1/4 inch through the material. So if I'm driving a 1/4 inch through, it's going to be a lot easier. But if that is 1/4 inch and long and thin, it's only got half the material mass. So it's going to blow out its temper a lot faster. So if I can get it in for 1 inch of distance up to 3/8 of an inch, which is double its thermal mass, it is going to absorb twice as much thermal energy before blowing out the temper. Right? Makes sense? I know that's like a whole lot of crazy right now. Anyway, I'm going to put a tape on this thing. So my tongs cover about 1.5 inches. So I'll give it a little bit of color. Get that tip down first. Work it in square. That's about right. Ease that. I'll do. I'm going to go one more heat on that for cleanup. But I've got good taper in it. I'm a little fat at the tip, but that'll be alright. I'm also a little bit not round, but that should all come in. If you're doing this by hand, I really recommend finding a healthy buddy who's good with a sledgehammer. It's going to be a bit of hard work. Either that or break out a 3-4 pound hand hammer, and you're going to have to work pretty hard at it. Recommend the horn if you can control that stuff for your drawing down. If you go back to the drawing down videos, using the horn is a really beneficial process for this. It does break down the material pretty quickly. I do demo this by hand, and it usually takes take 1 heat on the back end, probably 3-4 heats on the front end. So, you know, just be aware you can do it. It's just kind of grit. Ooh, I might use a paddle on this. That'll be fun. So I've probably seen this thing. I might actually use that for the round out. So I'll do a little bit of a rough round out. The dies on that hammer at the moment are pretty keen on the edges. They're not super keen, but they're pretty keen. So for doing stuff like this, it's a little aggressive. I'll do. It's a pretty solid preheat punch. Now I'm going to come in on that front end. Slightly rounder than it was, still a little wonky. And I'm going to take that first ½ inch, drop it down to 1/4 inch, round it out. Should be done. I don't need to get this thing super deep in the fire because I'm just working with that tip meat. And we can get to the heat treat on it. If you've got a lot of grind dressing to do, generally I recommend doing it before heat treating. Then you're done and dusted with it, you can get on with using the tool. Also, here's a little thought for you. Sure, you can make a nice shiny tool, but truth of the matter, for my personal experience, and everyone's going to have different experience of this depending on how they run their production, but I found that tools that have an ever so slight texture on them and still have the scale material on them have a longer, non-galling surface than highly polished pieces. Again, this is me and from my personal experience. So I try, if I can, not to have shiny tools. Sometimes I can't avoid that. But also that little unevenness in the surface, it almost acts like cavitation on the underside of a ship or a blue whale or something like that. The cavitation actually creates less surface connection with. Jess is laughing at me back here.
I'm laughing at the blue whale.
No, not blue whale.
No, I mean they do.
They do, yeah. They got lumpy bits on them. So, obviously if there's too much texture there, it's going to be a little crazy.
So you're saying make your punch like
Look
a
like
blue
a blue whale. That'd be great. Yeah. In other words, I'm really lazy, I forge it pretty damn close, and then I leave it be. Just focusing on that last little bit, trying to get the size down. That looks pretty good.
I hope that after this video we'll have a bunch of Smiths Googling blue whales.
Blue whales. Okay. What's a blue whale look like?
All the Smiths are going to be punch making and blue whale identification experts.
Alright, a little bit of round out. That's getting a little tough for me. I'm going to pop it back in the fire. The S7 will let you know when it's done. When you get that point into that black range where it's just like whoop, and it throws the hammer back at you and you're basically wasting your energy. So don't forge it too cold. Also, when you're on the power hammer, you can forge it too cold and cause it to fracture. Another thing, on rounding out, if you don't bring it down well in your octagonal form, and you round out really, really aggressively on the die, and you're just spinning in one direction. I remember Mr. Lloyd said this to us years and years ago. He's like, look, if you do this, what will actually happen is you'll shear the core, the skin off the core. And I was always like, well, that's a load of crap. But I actually managed to do it, and I was quite impressed with myself, and it turns out that Mr. Lloyd was correct. So apparently with the right amount of inappropriate forging technique, you can actually strip the core off, or the skin off the core. They will separate, and you basically wind up with something that looks like an ibex horn and the bone bit on the skull that's come apart. It's pretty grim. Anyway, on that note, back to this. I want to get this fairly straight-sided in my taper. That way it will penetrate better. If I've got a pregnant point, it won't have the same penetration. get everything pretty centered. So you know, I am right eye dominant, but my right eye isn't so good. So I side with my left eye. Quick size check on that tip. Hey, that'll do. It's almost dead nut. So got about 1/4 inch there, and I'm a shade over 3/8 there. So I'll work. Let's have a little discussion about colours. Can you see those colours against me?
Yes.
Somewhere down here-ish is bluey stuff, right? And then we've got purplies, and we've got bronze, and we got brown, bronze, and then we got into the straw range, and then into the light straw range. Over here, this is about 800, the grey area. The blue is 6-ish, the purplish is 4-ish, and then when we're up here, we're into the 300s, and then the very, very first colours appear at about 250 degrees. So, what we're shooting for on this tool is somewhere in that kind of dark straw to bronze range. I've taken a nice deep heat on my tool, about pretty much all of it up to temperature. It's a little warmer than it should be. I want to be salmon orangish. I'm more of a yellow, but the S7 can be exceedingly forgiving. I'm actually oil quenching it. S7 can actually air quench as well. But it air quenches at a higher temperature, about 2000 degrees, rather than at 1600. That's pretty good. Quenched out about the first inch. I have candle. So that first inch is now hardened. I'm allowing that heat to draw into there, and in actual fact, I'm going to wind up in the grey area, which means that it is hardened, but it has been tempered back quite aggressively. So it's going to be tough, not hard. So I want it to be tough so that it doesn't deform too much, but I don't want it hard, and thus being harder than my hammer face and damage the face of my hammer. So, you know, that's something to think about. Also, if you can have the opportunity to have a soft-faced hammer, so say a mild steel hammer or a, say like a 4140 hammer that has had a lower temper drawn on it, so 600, 800 degrees, that way it is tough, but it's not really a tool for anything other than abusing against hand tools and set hammers and that. Keeping a good eye on this front end, that's really the business end, that's pretty good. I'm going to quench out about 2 inches of it. Keeping a nice kind of bulb to my quench. I don't want a hard line. I want a little bit of up and down, so as I do my figure eight, I actually raise up a touch. Allowing that body heat to come out a touch. So I don't want too much thermal mass in that body to draw my temper. See that? Rack. Give it a little wipe off. Try not to burn yourself. This is a grinding rod, carburetor grinding rod, and I never use these when I buy the pedestal grinders, but I smash them up and use them for this. Works so much better than anything else. There we go, you can see the colours starting to stack. They're really tight and close together. It's a nice blues up here and bronzes and browns down there. And what I'm waiting for is that lighter colour there to reach my tip. And it may or may not get there. If you haven't got enough thermal mass here, you can actually add a little bit of heat by waving your tool in front of the fire. Don't heat this area. Put the heat back here so that the heat draws through rather than applying heat to that front end. Because invariably what you'll do, because this has less thermal mass, is you'll blow out the temper on the tip there, and you wind up with blue, and it'll be kind of silver here. Anyway, this is body drawn heat treating 101 in 5 minutes. Pretty basic stuff, but if you figure out how to do this, you then can make your own tools. Chisels, I do the same way. I really like 01 for chisels, but it can get a little fracturey if you're not careful, if you blow out that grain structure too much. S7's really, really forgiving. It doesn't hold the cutting edge quite as well, but depends on how well you're going to look after your tools. S7 also you don't need to normalize because it is an air hardening steel. I'm going to add a little bit of a heat bump to that one. So just wave it in front of the flame. Notice the tip is well out of the way. Low heat on it. Have a look. Starting to see that bronze creep. Almost there. See it? Almost there. Alright, that'll do. I take all the rest of the heat out of it. Because my body wasn't up to temperature, I'm not actually quenching it, and because I didn't have it up into that higher temperature range, it shouldn't harden out. Shouldn't. Just understand that oil will not get it all the way down to body temperature. So if you decide to grab a hold of it, after wiggling it around in the oil for a while, it might be a little toasty. And also, do not be tempted at this point to cool it off in water. I know it's really, really tempting, but the first time you do that and your tool that you've just spent the last 2 hours or so working on splits from tip to tail, you will have misery. Also, wipe the tongues off. That oily mess can be particularly annoying sometimes, especially when it dribbles down to the handles. It drives me nuts. Tongs that have been used for heat treat, people will put them up on the rack like that and the residue of the oil will dribble down. You grab a hold of it, you've kind of got shellacked oil. It's just a jelly mass. It's disgusting. Anyway, I'll show you how to do the grind dress out in that in a few minutes once it's cooled off sufficiently, and then we can get back to poking holes. And so to the grinder. Hello, hound. Sorry.
Hello, hound.
So I've got that little bit of a butthole, want a better description. So that little cavity in there, that happens because the inner core isn't moving. And of course it wasn't moving because I was doing finishing work, and I've got to get rid of that. When you're forging tool steels, hit it hard, hit it with intention. Use either the horn to get a little bit more press, use a plumb-faced hammer. That will actually help move the core a little bit more aggressively. So if you notice, I use the radius dies on the hammer. It reduces the amount of cavity that you get in that back end. So, just going to come in real aggressive. Get down to that hole. I'm not worried about blowing out the temper on the back end because it has a great temper already. A little bit of a downwards angle and rotation. It'll give me a slight dome to it. Still got a little touch of hole there. And then I like to come up into the soft, right there, give it a light work over. Gives me an ever so soft crest, and then about a 45 around the outside. And that gives me a not quite flat top. And that is with intention. I don't want a flat top because it makes it really hard for me to hit center. If I've got an ever so slight raise on the top of it, even with a slightly cockeyed hammer blow, it will actually hit center point, which means that my energy transfers truer through the mass. Okay, front end looks pretty round. Can you see that? Mm-hmm. I'm not going to muck with that at all, but it does need to be squared up a touch. I want a nice flat top. That'll do. That's all I need. Let's go use it. Alrighty. So I'm going to do poke a hole through a 1-inch bar. I'm using a 2.5 pound hammer. This is like a prototype hammer that I did with a, I think that's a 16-inch handle. And we're using the punch drift that I made earlier for video. So hopefully it'll go pretty well, and hopefully I won't whack my hand.
That was amazing.
That was pretty good, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Bad case of chopsticks there.
I said that might mess up your one heat punch.
That's gone down pretty well, so I'm like at 12 hammer blows right now. That's hit bottom. Look at that nice little conical hole. It's just lovely.
Mm-hmm.
Right,
You can really see it well in the video too.
No one wants to play with me. I'm gonna flip it over. Take that little bend out of it. That's my little spot. I can barely see it, but I can see it right there.
Mm-hmm.
It's a pretty good temperature. I'm just going to give it a light tap for the first bite. And here we go. No, it wasn't censored, blah blah blah. But there you go. It ain't that hard when you get used to it. But that little extra weight, that little extra length, so I can get back a touch away from the hammer handle, on the hammer handle, get a little bit more velocity behind it, a little bit more power. I was holding it back a little bit because I whacked the hell out of my hand about a month ago and probably fractured something a little bit.
A little traumatized.
Yeah, so, but easy enough, you know, you want to poke a hole in a 1-inch piece of steel, isn't that hard? So, go do some pieces, make some holes. Maybe you'll make something out of it.